Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 26, 2021 regular board meeting of the Pleasanton Unified School District. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We apologize for our little bit of a delay. We had some difficulties, technical difficulties. Appreciate Channel 30 working on that. I just want to remind everybody that as has been true since the governor's executive order over a year ago, the Brown Act requirements are changed for public meetings, and we are doing them via teleconference. This meeting is recorded, live streamed, and televised. You can see it on Channel 28 on cable TV or stream it at tv30.org. Public comment can be submitted up until the time that we begin the item, and you can find those links on our agenda that is on our website at pleasantonusd.net. So tonight, I would like to welcome everyone and make a few introductions. I'm going to start over on this side today. We have Trustee Mary Jo Carrion across the way here. Trustee Kelly McCaughey next to her, Trustee Steve Maher, Vice President Mark Miller. I'm Joan Larson, serving as the board president this year. To my right is Superintendent Dr. David Haglin. Down on the floor in front of us, we have Patrick Gannon, who is joining us via Zoom this evening. He is our coordinator of community engagement and communication. We have Mr. Ahmad Shikolosami. He is our assistant superintendent of business services. Tonight, joining us in lieu of Mr. Julio Hernandez, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, we have Director of HR, Mike Williams. Welcome. And we have Assistant Superintendent Ed Dialazo, who is our Assistant Sup of Student Support Services. And we have Dr. Janelle Woodward, who's our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. So welcome, everybody, tonight. I have one report out of closed session, and that is on item 2C1. The board voted 5-0, moved by Trustee McCaughey, seconded by Trustee Miller, to approve a compromise and release agreement for internal case number SED 111.21.22 for the amount not to exceed $59,800 for a multi-year agreement. All right. I'm hearing an echo. Is it somebody's playing it? It's outside. They're playing it. They're live streaming it very loudly. All right. So we need to approve the agenda this evening. Are there any changes to the agenda? Nope. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
I'll second it.
All right. It's been moved in and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Carries 5-0. All right, tonight for our recognitions and introductions, we are recognizing schools for their programs for positive behavior support and intervention. Dr. Haglin.
Thank you. And for this recognition, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Ed Dialazo.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Haglin, President Larson, Board of Trustees, Cabinet staff, and community. Thank you for the opportunity to recognize our awardees tonight. We are going to recognize 10 of our schools, and they have been recognized by the California PBIS Coalition for this award. While we're recognizing 10, all 15 schools last year did a really good job of providing positive engagement and behavioral supports to all of our students. So thank you for this opportunity. A little bit about PBIS. In 2015, PUSD started implementing positive behavioral interventions and supports, otherwise known as PBIS, at the elementary schools and continued the implementation at the middle and high schools the following year. Receiving the School Climate Transformation Grant allowed for the PBIS framework to be integrated to support the school climate and culture at each of our school sites. For the 2021 school year, 10 of our school sites in PUSD were recognized by the California PBIS Coalition for their efforts towards fostering a positive school climate and excellence in the implementation of the core features of PBIS. The California PBIS Coalition Award recognizes a school's outstanding contribution of support and care not just during the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, but through the transitions back to this school year to ensure that school environments are positive, predictable, consistent, and safe. Each PUSD award recipient received a letter of congratulations from the California PBIS Coalition and will be recognized at the annual California PBIS Conference in Sacramento in September. Additionally, each school was given a 2021 PBIS Digital Emblem Award that they can proudly display on their various media outlets as a celebration of their success. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ashley Sprader, our Coordinator of Student Services, who's helped lead the PBIS implementation for several years here in PUSD, and to say a few words and introduce the PBIS team members from each school being recognized. Ms. Sprader.
Thank you, Mr. D'Alazzo, and good evening, everyone. We sincerely appreciate your hard work and commitment to implementing PBIS with fidelity and creating the conditions to maximize academic, social, and behavioral outcomes for all of our students. Here tonight are PBIS team members from each school site that received an award for 2020-2021. If you are here when I say your name, please say hello so that we can recognize you. From Alisal, receiving gold, Vice Principal Lisa Padway. Fairlands also receiving gold, Principal Heidi Deeringhoff.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm so proud of my team and my community. Well earned, well deserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. From Valley View, receiving gold, Principal Gerardo Guzman Rico. Also receiving gold from Vintage Hills, Vice Principal Leslie Navarretti.
Go Dragons!
Also receiving gold, Walnut Grove, Vice Principal Dwight Pratt.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody. Way to go, Roadrunners and the Walnut Grove community. You deserve it.
Thank you. Receiving silver, Leidixon, Vice Principal Hillary Sowers.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. We're so proud of Leidixon.
Thank you. And receiving, bronze, Harvest Park, Vice Principal Nicole Hurtado.
Thank you, guys. We're super excited and getting everything going again for this year and making it to silver next year.
Thank you, Nicole. Also receiving bronze, Pleasanton Middle School Vice Principal Karen Cobb.
Hi, thank you. Way to go, Panthers. Keep showing your pride.
Thank you, Karen. Also receiving gold, Amador Valley High School Principal Joshua Butterfield and Vice Principal Brendan Nelson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the recognition. We have a pretty amazing team of people that work on this and can't be more appreciative to work with these folks that work for students.
Thank you very much.
Also receiving bronze from Moore Elementary, Principal Stephanie Pavlenko and Vice Principal Lydia Rice.
Thank you, everyone, for this recognition. We are so excited to continue our work this year.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And also with us is PBIS coach who supports all school sites, school social worker Teresa King McCarthy.
Hi, so proud of you guys. You guys do such a great job.
Thank you, Teresa. Congratulations again to all of our PUSD schools and for all the efforts of the PBIS school site team members. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Sprader. That concludes our recognition. Thank you.
That's awesome. And just to think that it was just a few short years ago when we received the first grant and the work began. And over the years, just to see it become such a cultural, embedded in the culture at the school sites, it's just been really terrific. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work. And I'm so happy you've been recognized tonight. All right, so tonight we'll move on to item number 7, which is our associations. We'll hear from our representatives from our labor associations. The California School Employees Association does not have a report this evening, so we will welcome Michelle Verkeilen, the president of the Association of Pleasanton Teachers.
Good evening, President Larson, members of the board, Dr. Haglund, members of the cabinet, and our community. I am Michelle Verkeilen, president of the Association of Pleasanton Teachers. Pleasanton students deserve the best, and APT members are dedicated to supporting our students. We are loving being back in person in the classroom with our students, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been a bumpy start. We have had HVAC issues and COVID cases. We have all had to quarantine both staff and students. We are recreating how we structure our school days in order to better minimize exposure risks. Safety is at the core of everything we do. Employee morale is at an all-time low. I've been inundated with calls about leaves, retiring, resigning. I hear the exasperation. I see the daily struggle. Our educators are true professionals because you don't see that when you walk through the door into these inviting learning environments. We love our students. We are in it for the kids and are on stage. The performance looks seamless, but backstage is another story. As usual, our site admin and classified partners are with us every step of the way, helping us create the illusion of normalcy. My members are asking if there is any hope on the horizon, and I want to tell them yes, but I can't give them that yes. That yes needs to come from you. We need a true partnership at all levels, and we need to be supported in the daily workings and the big picture so that we can focus solely on giving our students what they deserve, the best. So my ask tonight is, are you committed to partnering with us? Are you willing to listen to what the needs are and respond quickly and efficiently so that our educators can continue to give Pleasanton students the best? Pleasanton has a reputation of being the top and being a destination district. We need you to help us to continue making this a destination district. And that means supporting our students by investing in our highly qualified educators, providing the best resources and supports for all our students, and not solely in management's budget. So we go into fall. As we go into fall, we are committed 150% to making sure that each student thrives to their fullest potential. Stand with us and support our students to make it possible for us to do this because Pleasanton students deserve the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Now we'll move on to item number 8, which is public comments from the community. These are comments for items not on our agenda this evening due to the Brown Act. We don't discuss or engage in dialogue with community members on the public comment because things are not on our agenda. So, Mr. Gannon, do we have public comment tonight?
We do, President Larson. Our first comment will come from Jackie Cota and then Mark Rogers. Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you. I had to unmute myself. Ephesians 6 reminds us that the modern war on freedom is not merely political, it is spiritual. Ephesians 6 is a rallying cry for all Christians. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against the spiritual wickedness in high places. Congratulations. School districts have achieved goal number 17 of the 45 communist goals, as read into the congressional record in 1963, which reads, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of the teachers' associations, and put party line in textbooks. Patriots are rising all over the country to battle the progressive communist movement infecting America. No longer do my brothers and sisters on both sides of political spectrums enjoy the freedoms we once were afforded under our Constitution. We see the wiles of the devil even turning on their once supporters of my body, my choice, and even now they're waking up to the dangers of Big Brother and the New World Order. Now that it is infecting their lives, they can no longer say, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't have to worry. Parents across the nation are rising and speaking out in front of their elected officials who are imposing anti-science-based mandates and racist curriculum on children because they're so drunk with power and blinded by journal terrorism. They refuse to be leaders in the truth and facts. We pity our neighbors who are still so blinded by propaganda they cannot see the dangers infringing on our freedoms. They have been polarized by fear, created the subterfuge of evil, and their unwillingness to seek the truth due to willful ignorance. We see school boards implementing illegal mandates, counter to science, scapegoating their decisions at establishment of public health officials, CDC, and highly corrupt teachers' unions. They say history repeats itself. We are experiencing this in real time. The doctors, bureaucrats, and media officials tried at Nuremberg said, we were only doing what we were told to do. Ignorance is not an excuse. We all know the fate of those using that excuse. Do you think your anti-science and racist decisions are based on ignorance or evil? We've provided you with the science on masks. We've provided
Okay,
you, Ms.
thank
Cota.
you.
Thank you.
All right, next we will have Mark.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Mark Rogers, and I'm a longtime resident of Pleasanton. And it kind of feels right now like I'm living in San Francisco because of all of you and your self-righteous measures that you put in place to what I view as abuse of children and forcing them to wear masks. I may have children one day, and I hope people like you are not in charge of this school district. You're blindly following the CDPH guidance to mask children, even though there is zero evidence to show that children are at a significant risk of catching or dying from the CCP coronavirus. In fact, children who drive to school are at a much larger risk of dying on the way to school than from COVID-19, according to the CDC. The CDC's research says the following: children 5 to 14 years old have a 0.2 chance of dying from COVID. Suicide is 1.5, homicide 0.7, cardiovascular disease 0.6, drowning 0.5, flu and pneumonia 0.3, suffocation and COVID are the exact same 0.2 chance of dying. Yet the district still blindly trusts the CDPH guidance to mask children. We know what masking children does. This has a serious mental health toll on young people. The inability to communicate and the inability to hear what teachers are saying. In fact, masking makes people unfamiliar with each other, and it makes you less likely to be able to empathize with another person, especially children. God gave us a face for a reason. Dr. Macri wrote a piece in which he studied 48,000 cases of children under age 18 reported to have COVID between April and August of last year. How many children died? He said, quote, "Our report found a mortality rate of 0 among children without a pre-existing medical condition such as leukemia. So why all of this mask craziness? There was a 22.3% spike in ER trips for potential suicides by children aged 12 to 17 in summer 2020 compared to 2019, according to the findings published by the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report." And we know there's a direct link.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
President Larson, that is all of our public comments for this evening.
I'm sorry, I thought we had 3.
We do, but I do not see the third
Okay,
individual.
thank you. All right, that is all for the public comment on items not on our agenda this evening. We'll now move on to item number 9, which is our high school representative report. Dr. Haglund.
Patrick, do we have our student rep on the line?
Yes, we do.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chloe Peisner, and I'm the ASB president of Amador Valley High School. So basically, I'm going to go over academics, activities, and athletics at Amador right now. So for students, they're saying that school is going pretty easily, and underclassmen are saying that they're struggling in school right now. It's been a hard transition going from a middle school workload to an online workload to a real high school workload. Underclassmen believe they have a pretty heavy workload so far, and the first week back was a pretty good transition, light workload, and there was little to no homework, focusing on the social aspects and mental health of students. The second week back was also super fun for all the students at Amador. It was a light workload. There was tons of Spirit Week and lots of spirit at Amador. We had music playing at the quad at lunch, so that was really fun. Friday, we also had our first Aloha rally in almost 2 years. And that was also our first school-wide event in almost 2 years as well. Students and staff mentioned that they are feeling a little bit burnt out because in-class teaching minutes have increased to almost 40 minutes a day. There's quite a bit of heavy lecturing compared to our classes being shorter online and the school day ending very early when we were virtual. Without a longer lunch and just having our brunches for the students, a lot of students are saying that they're feeling burnt out by around third period. which is on a non-advisory schedule. Leadership likes having their classes fourth period before lunch to help set up events beforehand. Okay, and then teachers also have been telling our leadership class that they've been needing recycling bins. Usually we help out with the recycling at Amador, and we didn't think that leadership should be the ones paying for those things. We have a list of the teachers in classrooms who do need recycling bins. For activities, we had our first Aloha rally again. It went really good overall, and it was a great way to get students pumped for the upcoming school year. Upcoming next in October and September, we have our SDC Harvest Dance, which is for the special day class. Our main focus for the next couple weeks is Pigskin, which is September 24th, Homecoming Skits, Homecoming Spirit Week, and Homecoming. So we're just going to try to make sure it's safe as possible, and we'll just adjust to any COVID restrictions. And for athletics, we have our first football game September 3rd. September 24th is Pigskin. We also have cheerleading, water polo, tennis, marching band, and cross country going on. And that's my update.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you very much. Are there any questions by the trustees for our student board rep tonight? No? Thank you so much. We'll move on now to the superintendent's report. Dr. Haglund?
Thank you, Chloe. It's great to have students back on the agenda with us, so thank you for a great report.
Thank you.
This week, the FDA announced full approval of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, which is an incredible step forward for implementing the recommendations of the local, state, and federal health departments for those who are eligible to get vaccinated. We hope that this news will help those with reservations and increase the percentage of eligible community members to take that step as a means to protect themselves, but also those that they come in contact with. I would like to thank our PUSD community as well as each member of our district and school site teams for their effort to support the safety of our students while they engage with our teachers in the world-class educational experience that Pleasanton is known for. A special thank you to our Student Support Services team, led by Mr. Dialazzo, in partnership with our school COVID-19 liaisons for their Herculean efforts in these first few weeks of school. We're very grateful for the work of the entire team, Mr. Dialazzo. We all have vital roles to play in protecting the safety and health of our school communities. This starts each and every morning with staff, students, and families verifying that they have not been exposed, diagnosed with COVID, or experiencing any new symptoms associated with the virus. We know our students love school, and we want to keep them in the classroom with the least amount of disruption possible. Parents can help us accomplish this by keeping their child home if they are feeling ill. This simple act helps your student, as well as those around them. Students should remain home until they are symptom-free. To help students get back to school as soon as it is safe to do so, our team transformed our health services office into a testing center, offering PCR tests to students who have been in close contact with a COVID-19 positive individual. I want to close by reiterating the importance of wearing a mask. Aside from our daily screener, this is one of the most important things that our students can do to protect themselves, whether indoors or outdoors, whether in school or in the community. This is a small inconvenience to bear in order to keep our kids safe and our schools open. We will get through this, as we always have, by acting together. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Haglund. And I would reiterate that on the call today, Dr. Moss said that the best thing for families or parents or adults, teachers, school employees who are concerned about the spread is to make sure you're vaccinated. So I would just add that comment. We'll move on now to item 11, which is our consent agenda. These items are routine generally in nature and approved by one vote. unless a board member or community member wishes to pull an item off for discussion. Is there anything? Nope. All right, seeing none, I'll seek a motion for approval.
I'll second it.
So it's been moved by Steve Maher and seconded by Kelly McCaughey to approve the consent agenda. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
McCaughey?
Aye.
Maher? Aye. Miller?
Aye.
Larson, aye. Thank you. All right, on to our report, discussion, and possible action items. Our first item up tonight is a board governance workshop where we're going to discuss a number of items, and the superintendent's going to lead us in this work.
That I am. So hopefully everybody's got their, either their technology in front of them or their printed out version of the presentation, because this is going to be an interactive activity. We're going to do our best to collaborate here from the dais. Patrick, if you would drive the presentation, we could get that started. And our cabinet folks are, our cabinet folks are prepared to take notes as you talk. So you don't have to do that part. They're going to try to capture everything for you. Not that, but the actual presentation, Patrick. So as he's getting that presentation up, I just wanted to start with a little bit of an introduction as for the community, those who may not be familiar with our organizational work plan. I just wanted to give a little bit of background. The organizational work plan actually started as my entry plan that I submitted to the board when I began working in PUSD back in 2017. I discussed the goals during my introductory meetings with staff and parents and various community groups during the 2017-2018 school year. That document also served as the foundation of my performance evaluation. In year 2, the original entry plan was converted into the organizational work plan, and we began to incorporate goal-related objectives and action steps for each division. The objectives informed performance evaluations for the executive cabinet team to strengthen the alignment across the entire organization. We vetted the goals during public board meetings that were held in the community during the 2018-2019 school year. And then over the course of the 2019-2020 and 2020-21 school years, we've worked to incorporate the organizational work plan goals into the department and school site planning documents to establish clear links between the organizational work plan, or LCAP, and the single site plans for student achievement at each of the schools. Despite the rise of COVID and related shifts in focus, we continued to use the organizational work plan to retain focus on instructional and systemic priorities. These actions over the course of the past 4 years helped break down silos in the district, strengthened alignment between planning processes and action plans, and ensured the organization was moving forward in a measured and strategic manner. This year, we want to complete the organizational alignment process by incorporating board objectives for the updated organizational work plan goals. Our goal tonight is to discuss how the board might support the organizational work plan goals with specific, targeted, and measurable actions for the 21-22 school year. We will take copious notes as you talk with one another, and then we will work to synthesize the ideas and bring back a document for you to consider for approval. So it's not necessary that we get all of the words right during the meeting tonight. It's important that we get the ideas down on paper.
Did you look at me when you said that?
It wasn't intentional. It was a Freudian thing. I apologize. So we're going to go now to the next slide, Patrick. So the organizational work plan, we've talked a bit about this. I just want to point out a few things, and these are statements that are taken directly from the organizational work plan itself. That one of the goals is to ensure thoughtful, purposeful, proactive, and strategic action across the organization. Organizations work most effectively when they work in sync across various divisions, and so that's one of the intentions of this document. It represents our engagement as an organization, as a staff, and as a governance board and a continuous improvement process that extends over time, multiple years. And the strategic actions for the board will only further promote that alignment because everybody will be looking at the same ideas. And so that's what we're focused on in the work plan. So next slide identifies the 5 goals that are identified in the organizational work plan. And the first goal really focuses on our efforts to increase student achievement and to identify opportunity gaps that exist within the system. It also calls out a lot of activity that's designed to support our intervention and support structures so that we're not just dealing with the academic needs of students, but also the social and mental health needs of the students as well. And not just the students, but you'll note that it says of staff and of families. So we'll talk a little bit about that probably tonight. And then one of the revised goals this year is goal number 3, and it focuses on our work to understand the systemic barriers to equity and inclusion. We've been talking about that along with our consultant and our work with our staff. Identify the barriers, but then to work strategically to deconstruct those barriers. So it's not good enough just to point them out. We actually have to have actions that are going to pull those barriers down. The 4th goal is also slightly modified to promote the professional culture that values collaboration. That was an important 2 words that was placed into that goal. It's not just good enough to have a productive pipeline for recruitment and retention. We have to have a system that values collaboration throughout that process. So that was added this year. And that we want to not just recruit, develop, we also want to retain a diverse and highly qualified workforce. So the word diverse was also added to that fourth goal. And then finally, continuing to improve our efforts relating to customer service, communication, and stakeholder engagement. That's something that we started in the first year, and we've worked every year to make improvements in that area. So our work tonight is to look at how the board, what is the board's function within those goals. And so if you think about those objectives, action steps, and metrics or key performance indicators, that's what KPI means. Think about it like we do in a classroom. What is it that we want students to learn? How will we know if they learned it, and what will we do if they don't, right? So it's the same concept in your thinking of these objectives. What is it that we want to have happen? What do we want to see happen? What steps will we take to achieve that end? And then what will we be looking for to ensure that success is occurring related to those goals? So in the first goal, it's talking about increasing achievement and opportunity gaps. So you're looking at the role that the board members have, the board as a corporate body, but also as individual members. So I'm going to give you maybe an idea just for the first one. So relating to increasing achievement, that's related to curriculum and instruction. And so just last month, you approved what? You approved a subcommittee for teaching and learning, right? So that's an example of where the board members, individual trustees who serve on that committee, actually have a role to play in that process. So you could talk, as an example, what do we want to see? Have an active engagement in the curriculum and instruction committee. So that might be the objective. So what are the action steps? Number 1, you passed the committee, so check that off, you already did it. Number 2, you appointed 2 trustees to sit on that committee. Check that off, you've already done it. So the next action step might be relating to establishing dates for the committees and ensuring that there's consistent participation by the appointed board members. So how will we know if that actually happened? What are the indicators of success? So you might look at the agendas for that committee. You might look at the minutes for that committee, because the minutes will say whether or not a person attended the committee or didn't attend that committee. you'll be able to look to see if that committee really is focusing on increasing achievement and identifying opportunity gaps. So I watched you kind of just made one up on the fly there, right? So you probably have been thinking about other things you'd like to include as well. So I don't want to do all the talking here. I just wanted to kind of put one down as an example. So with that, I'm going to open the floor and let's see what you've got for that first goal. And the other thing that I probably should say before we get started is that it's not essential that you have 14 objectives. You really want to focus your work. Remember, this is going to be added to another document that already has a whole bunch of objectives attached to it. So really identify those key things that you think you can do to influence that process.
Does anyone have anything they would like to open the floor with?
I'll start. So first of all, I mean, I do want to say that I take the goals very literally, I guess is the word I would describe. And I think they were well worded. And so there was, there are certain elements in here that are, the kind of key components, right? So like the first thing here is the personalized learning strategies. So, I'd say, how does the board support that? I don't know exactly what a personalized learning strategy looks like beyond something like an IEP or whatever, but are we as a district, is it a goal for us as a district to create for every student a personalized learning strategy? Is that going to be one of the goals? And how can we as a board support that effort? That's a big job. So I just throw that back out. That's the first thing on here, right?
Right. So an example of personalizing the learning trajectory of each individual student would fit with the MAP assessments that we're using. It's a growth-based model that interprets where a student is with language arts or with mathematics, and it lays down next steps for that. So it's not an IEP, but it is an individual assessment that helps the teachers determine what's necessary for that student or a group of like students. That's personalized because it's based on the achievement data from those students.
So, I mean, I think that's a wonderful strategy. And I in my mind, it would be, as a board, we could definitely provide support, funding support and so forth for continuing the expansion of MAP and that whole part of that. And certainly an indicator or a KPI could be literally, do we have a learning strategy for every single person, and can we document that? And I think that's a really, really valuable goal. The achievement side is an interesting one because, again, it's like, what does that mean? We, as a board, I think have taken a very strong position on that's a big goal of ours. I mean, we ask every year, what's the accountability for the test score improvements and all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to think, actually, my strategy in doing this was kind of like, as a district, what should we be doing, not necessarily as a board, but they kind of relate. So I do think that, we have the ability through oversight and funding and, allocating of funds and things like that, board policies, right, that we could use to, to focus on that, increase achievement. And I'm trying to think of some specific examples that might be good for that. The other one that I thought was, sorry, I'm just, throwing out ideas. The other thing that I thought was interesting was identifying opportunity gaps. So, I think part of that is potentially in our equity and diversity efforts. That is certainly a board goal, is to execute on the plan we have for that. As well, the CCEIS component is something that I think we strongly support it, put our weight behind there. But this identification of gaps, that's tough. I mean, that's not, other than the things I mentioned before, studies, that type of thing, surveys. Anyway, I don't have a great answer for that one.
No, I think that you're doing exactly what you need to do, just to level set, right? It's having a conversation about the things that are important and then trying to determine what are the things that we can do as a board to support the work of the staff. If you look at each one of the goals, there's different things that the staff is doing, and you want yours to be an added component to that, not confusing in with the work that they're already engaged in. And so the calling for reports, making sure that the agendas that you create as the board president incorporate student data reports on a routine basis. You all know, because you went through the CSBA training, the percentage of time that the board spends in board meetings. Is it on facilities and construction, or is it on academics? And so highly effective boards know how to make sure they keep that focus in the public conversation about achievement. And those are reports that the staff can bring to you based on your request at the end of meetings. I'd like to learn more about X, right? So that brings that data back to you.
So, and that's helpful, thank you. And so, I really would say on the opportunity gap side, when we, and we also have a diversity and inclusion goal, but I do think that the way we talked about the efforts with Nicole was around opportunities. Everybody should have opportunities. And so I do think that, I feel we should strongly support that effort, and that we should make sure that the opportunity gaps are not just necessarily for, groups that have in the past, been marginalized maybe, but for everybody, right? What are the gaps? And so keep that inclusive of the whole population. So for me, that would be a big thing there. And so also, the continued expansion of MAP, and the report out of, what we're seeing. I think we want to see those. Is it the REIT score? What are, the
RIT scores?
Yeah. We want to definitely see those improve and so forth. So
I'd like to kind of add on to that, because I like the way you're talking about this, and I figured that you would have, you're all about the metrics, right? I was like, Mark's going to have this down. And kind of going back to what you said about, are we going to have a personalized learning plan for every student? And that's not an unheard of idea, but I know the idea here is to not make additional work. But, we have a lot of teachers that do that with our students already, especially in elementary school. And, so encouraging that sort of self-directed, using the MAP growth, students get the reports, parents get the reports about where students are, and students think about what it is that they're learning and where they're learning and where they need to go from here, and work on that plan. How would our continued support of that look, so to where students really are developing their own, they're doing the whole metacognitive work, and they're developing their plan for their learning. And again, kind of going back to what we talked about in prior meetings with what we've learned through distance learning, is that whole individualized speed at which students learn, and how I, as a board member, would like to see us move more. And I know I've talked about this a lot. I don't know how to get there. And I don't know what steps I would want us to request and move us in that direction, other than to perhaps support staff who are interested in doing that work, in having them have a committee that works on that, and pilots, or a particular school site is interested in a way of doing that, and we could be supportive in that work, in terms of either if we need to provide additional resources, or we need to make time and space for that work. I think that if we learn nothing else from the last year and a half, And if we don't do anything about it, to me, it's just a shame. So I like that, and I also feel that we know more about the information that we're getting from some of these scores than we've been prepared to do something about. So, asking to say, doing a little bit more of that oversight role and saying, okay, especially with the LCAP, it's not enough to say this is a strategy or this is a program we're going to do. We're supposed to be identifying the best program. We're supposed to be saying, oh, we tried this, it didn't work, kill it, move on to something that we believe will work better, because we're supposed to be spending those dollars on research-based, all of that kind of, best practice to move the needle of whatever the goal is that we're trying to achieve. And so, as a board, we approve the LCAP. We listen to the work being done by our LCAC and our staff, and we make those, and we approve those, and we align our budget to make sure that we have the LCAP reflected in that. But I'd like to see more. I'd like to see that honestly we'd be looking at what are those ingredients that are making a difference? Why is this classroom moving the needle on these students? What are they doing? And how can we share that and replicate it? And I don't know how to make that into a metric.
That's probably a good example of something that is the work of staff.
Okay.
But they're the ones that should be monitoring those things. And your work is the accountability side and the policy side. And so asking for presentations that demonstrate those things that they said that they were going to do, that's perfectly appropriate. And that is a way for you to assert not just your oversight responsibility, but your authority as a board, that the district is moving in the direction that you've given to me and I've given to the team.
So can I just add on to that? Because I was thinking about that too. How do we stay in our lane? And, and I think our lane is policy and oversight, but I was thinking about the goal 1.2, the MAP assessments. How do we make them really, I feel sometimes there's a disconnect between a teacher giving a test and then actually using that information. So do we establish a committee, like you said, for them to be, what are teachers' best practices? Do we have a policy in place? Do we review the data? What can we do? So those are some of the things that I've been struggling with. How do we review the data in a meaningful way? What can we do? So I don't know.
If I could extend on the conversation and kind of absorbing what everyone's saying, I feel that that's a great way for an objective, is that, perhaps we revisit the LCAP related to the progress of the student achievement with the MAP scores. That could be an objective that we could incorporate. I'm looking at literally, like that objective and the action step. For me, what really stands out, I love the idea behind the MAP assessments for growth, because it's monitoring progress. I'd love to have the conversation of how we can extend on, other measures of student growth, whether it be other formative assessments, portfolios. And so my mind, the way I'm articulating this is, is that an option that perhaps we look into, perhaps with the one-time funding, support with that growth assessment process this year, and we have a conversation about that, and that could be something that we talk about, because I'm thinking about what Trustee Miller said, is in terms of the accountability and the funding aspect of it. Maybe that's something that we can discuss and consider. And then something to what Trustee Carrion said, really thinking, and maybe this goes into the action step from the subcommittee for the teaching and learning aspect, but taking a look at some of the policies that relate to instruction and the curriculum, and really think about institutionally, are we making sure that we're reaching all of our students, and just revisiting on the policy aspect, but connecting it more so on the achievement aspect and the success for our students. So those are just some of my thoughts.
I guess when I get frustrated at times
is I hear that we want to improve students, we want to do a lot of things with achievement, but most of the information we get back or gathered and given to us is kind of large. By large, I mean it's all the students. What meant something to me is when we had that report about how many students have been in intervention for 2 years, how many have been in intervention for 3 years. I would like to see more reports about that, because then I could focus on, okay, why? What is going on? What are we using? What type of funding do you need? What kind of support do you need from the board? And when I look at our history, those students that are having difficulties, we have the same percentage for the last 5 years. It has not changed one iota. And so I think we need to do a better job of, okay, who is having the trouble? What type of trouble are they having? And are we consistent as a district? If I go to, let's say, school A, what are they doing for a student that's doing well? And much like what you said, Joan, what are they doing? How come their students are having success? Then I go to school D and they're not having success. What are they doing that's not successful? And I would like to see somehow the board put together some type of reporting that comes back to us that gives us authentic results. And not that the other results aren't authentic, but when I hear MAP and all those are large results for me. I want to know individual schools, how are students doing? Or district-wide, how are students? We now have most students moving out of intervention in 2 years. They're becoming grade level. I want that, not students that are on for 4 or 5 years, or I get parent calls, my child's been going to intervention for 4 years, he's now moving to middle school, and now they're putting him in reading class and math class. You know, now maybe there's some cases that happens, but overall, if we're going to improve our students, we need to make sure that we get consistent and that we have something in place that says, okay, we got student A having trouble, here's our options we could use for that student. And I'm not saying I would make those options, but our people out here would.
You know, and can I extend that a little bit, because I think you're making a good point. And all you guys, I mean, I think what I'm hearing and what I wrote down here is that I think as a board, we need to ensure accountability for student achievement and, you know, whatever, you know, growth, I guess you might want to say it, by focusing on not just what are the results, but actions as stemming from the results. So in that regard, every presentation that talks about, okay, well, this is the scores we got or whatever, there should be if it didn't meet the goal, what are we going to do differently next time? What's the remediation? If it did meet the goal or exceed the goal, to your point, Joan, it's like, how are we going to take that and extend it to other sites, students, whatever it is, right? So it's really, really taking okay, this is what happened, that's fine, but now what are we going to do about it? You know, and that's the whole goal of LCAP in a sense, is like you have these measures, okay, we're supposed to increase by 5% or whatever. Well, what if we don't meet that? We don't oftentimes have that hard conversation. What are we going to do differently this next time? So anyway, hopefully I don't want to, you know.
That's perfect, Mark. I mean, you're exactly right. If a student's not succeeding, why? And what can we do to help them? I want our parents to say, my child was struggling, but you know what? School A has this program. They put him in this program of intervention, and he or she is making progress. I want to hear that.
So you guys have had a great discussion about a pretty important issue. So let's back up a little bit and try to figure out in what ways does the board have already established or recently established footprints in that process. So just like with the budget committee, right? Ahmad brings the budget forward to the budget committee before he brings it to the board. And the two members that sit on the budget committee ask questions and give feedback, which often results in changes in the presentation. Same thing would be true with the policy committee. So if it's a policy-related issue, the two members of the board that sit on the policy committee, they're the ones that are hearing the policies, and we're bringing even administrative regulations to that group together to discuss. So the board has the ability to influence that through the two board members that sit on that committee before it even gets to the full board. Same thing with the instructional and curriculum and instruction committee. Those presentations should come to that committee first. Those two members should have the ability to represent their peers by asking the questions that they've heard in this dialogue. So is that data that Mark was talking about on the report that you're reviewing before it goes to the board? And if it's not, you have the opportunity to ask for it to be on the board, to hold the staff accountable to what the board has already established. Does that make sense? So that's why having those committees was so important, because it gives board members, not the entire board at the same time, but representatives from the board, input into that thinking and development process along the way. So where will the LCAP come? That will come up likely as well through that committee prior to coming to the full board. Now that's going to require staff to be thinking out way ahead, because if there's another fleshing out of the document that needs to occur before we take it to the board, we can't be putting presentations together the week before a board meeting. That's actually going to be helpful to staff to get that pre-thinking done ahead of time and be able to really have time to look at it. It also might, however, result in not being able to get things to the board as fast as the board sometimes wants them to get there, because there's other processes that have to be engaged. But if we do it well, the reports that come to the final board are going to be better reports and more targeted towards the things that you guys have asked for.
And I'd just like to add the committee work that's done, and this school district didn't always have subcommittees, but it works best when the members of those subcommittees are not just thinking about the items that they're talking about with staff through their own lens, but they're considering what they know about their fellow trustees and their points of view. And you have relationships, and you've learned by serving together that this is an issue that Mary Jo cares deeply about, and she has a particular concern. And so I want to make sure in the subcommittee that concern gets addressed before it's a surprise, or before it comes, or that we've had conversation as a board, and we're kind of all on the same page on one particular thing. That's great. But sometimes you'll have a minority viewpoint, and it's our jobs to represent that minority viewpoint on our subcommittees as well, to say, okay, I know that this board member is going to be concerned about this one issue. Can we talk about this now? And and have those things. I'm just kind of saying that because you guys are going to be inaugurating a new subcommittee, and you will have heard from the other three of us things that we're interested in and concerned about, and obviously we haven't made votes on or decided on, but you'll have it in your mind about things that each of us care about, what Steve just talked about, for example. So I just wanted to say that it's you're not just there representing yourself, you're representing the board and doing that work in subcommittee. And what that's allowed us to do, going back just a little bit to the percentage of items on our business agenda that have to do with students versus facilities versus whatever. What having these subcommittees has allowed us to do, in addition to the weekly communication, the pages and pages that we read on Sundays, is allowed us to focus our board meeting agendas, and we can dispense with a lot of stuff on consent, because we're all we're comfortable with the process, and we've learned that we understand what the items are, we understand how to ask the questions, we get the answers to the questions that we have, and so those things can be dispensed with, and we're not spending enormous amounts of time on some of the things like that, and we can spend more time on student achievement issues. So I know it was a little bit windy, but I just think it's important for the public to understand, and for us to understand this relationship that we have with the work that we do in the subcommittees.
So, if we spend half an hour on every single one of these things, we're never going to get through it. So if you have additional things that you'd like to put onto this one, just go ahead and send that to me and I'll put it into the document for you. But let's go ahead and move on to goal 2 in case there's some things you'd like to bring up about goal 2. And Patrick, would you just switch the view so that they can see the working document that the team's putting together, just so there's some level of confidence that we actually are taking notes?
So if I could share, for goal number 2 is strengthen intervention support structures to effectively improve the physical, mental, and social wellness of students, families, and staff. I was thinking of this high level from a board perspective of figuring out a way to partner with the city on a social emotional learning initiative, maybe connecting in with the youth commission, and conversations with the city liaison committee on maybe like a special, incentive program, a series of special initiatives that we partner with the city and the community specific on the social emotional learning aspect. It was just one of my thoughts.
So if everybody wants to look up at the screens, you can kind of see how the notes are being collected. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kelly, but just wanted people to get this, and then we can put the PowerPoint back up. So the team is just taking notes based on what you're saying, and then you'll send me any other feedback that you have about goal number 1. So back to goal number 2. Thank you, Patrick. You can put the other slide back up, and Kelly, you can continue if you like.
Sure. So I was just trying to think more action-oriented with the board and how the board could engage on an initiative specific with the social emotional endeavors, especially with recovery and bouncing back with COVID. I felt like this would be a great area to really focus on, a particular initiative that the board would participate and engage in with the community or something of that sort. So
if I could summarize, just to make sure I'm getting it. So the objective is to increase the partnerships between the district and the city related to student mental health. That's just a simple statement. Action steps, engage in conversations during the city liaison meeting or in other meetings that board members have with city council members. And then the metric would be city council agendas, board agendas, and city liaison agendas. So that might be a simple way to state that goal across this document.
The only thing I would add to what you've summarized is that I know the Youth Commission offers seminars and workshops, so it might be an opportunity for the board or in the district to have conversations where we might co-present something. So just to add on to what you stated.
What?
I would like to see in Kelly's kind of objective that we also explore local universities, local hospitals. They have programs that they're willing to share with us about mental health and wellness and so forth. And so I would hope we would look at that. Cost effective, it'd be free.
So that would be an example of work that staff would do. What do you see the board's role in that to be?
Well, as active as we're allowed to be, I guess.
Microphone.
This is on.
Mine's on.
Okay. So, policy relations.
I think you just need to, I'm sorry, I think you just need to speak.
Okay.
So, policy. Previously, we had a different board member. That's maybe he was talking about me, not you, Steve. A previous board member was engaged with the Alameda County Health Department, and so it's leveraging board members' relationships and roles in other organizations to bring those resources to the district. That's absolutely a board role.
Yeah, I think my role is not to advocate. Leave it to the authorities to make a decision where they want to go.
I do think it's important that whatever goals and objectives we put in place, that we are prepared to actually do those things. So that is, you know, if we want to go there, then we're committing to engaging that way. So,
Well, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Just don't say it, walk to walk.
Well, and we also have the California Healthy Kids Survey, and we have some staff surveys. Several years ago, it's been probably over 10 years ago, we did a lot of work with the 40 developmental assets. And so I was looking at this more like, rather than just ask, it's like, what do we do with the information that we're getting? So when we get the California Healthy Kids Survey results, and we ask for that, so that is a board, role, then we would have to ask staff, so we're low, or we have students, 12% of sophomores answered the survey that they've had suicidal ideation. So then my role as a board member would be to say, what are you going to do about that? That's what I'm kind of struggling with. So, I mean, as opposed to the idea of, I know we've worked, various times with the Wellness Committee. There's been some conversation about resurrecting the Wellness Committee that would do the focused work on this. And, it could be one board member or whatever serving on that, or none serving on it. But the idea that we would support folks who would look at the data and then propose things to be done about that data, and then we would support that work. Is that?
Yeah, so, Ed, if he desired to have a board subcommittee that looked at issues related to student wellness, he certainly could make that proposal to give more of a voice. But when you think about it, a lot of the work that we've done recently with PBIS and MTSS and the social workers, that's required action on the board to fund new positions that were brought to the board because the board raised the issue. And so raising the issue, having conversations about the issue, and then supporting staff requests for staffing positions to address the issue as necessary is one thing. The other thing is the policy and the regulations that support the wellness work. So, if we're feeling like we're not making progress in a particular area, one of the things a board member could do is ask for those policies to be pulled and reviewed by the board policy subcommittee meeting to make sure that they're up to date and they really are addressing the issues that the board and Ed Code believes is best. That's another way to do it.
That's a good idea. Let's put that on the list.
I'd like to see us prioritize funding for positions that increase direct connections with students in the community to identify need, basically. And, we've got, one social worker, I think, or I don't know how many we have, four social workers, yeah. So, five, okay, five. And, we do have some opportunities maybe with some extra funding this year to really kind of increase that, right? Because there's probably more need right now than ever before. But the word I wrote down here is connections, and it's like, that is a metric you could capture. How many people are we reaching? And you guys do a great job, by the way, Ed, on reporting number of cases of people who have reached out to, the CARES and all this kind of thing, right? And so that's really great. But I do think we have the opportunity with some extra funding this year to really prioritize that.
Well, and to celebrate successes when successes occur. As an example, we celebrated tonight the PBIS work, which is great work that was grant funded until when, Ed? Year and a half ago?
Ended just last year.
So the funding went away, but you acted to sustain the positions with general funding. And so that is a way that the board absolutely can support their priorities by making sure that, yes, we had a great grant, yes, we used those dollars up, yes, the grant went away, but we think the work needs to continue.
One point I'd like to extend on that the points just made would be other forms of expression to help with those connections. Like one thing that comes to mind is that art therapy or the arts. I know some schools have individual funding, for example, to support the arts at the elementary level, but that may not be necessarily across the board. So with the extra funding that Trustee Miller's talking about, other ways for students to express out their feelings, expressive arts is just one thought I'm thinking about that could help really help students make those connections and express their feelings and, dealing with some of the trauma with coming back from, online for 18 months.
You want to go?
Yeah, please,
Okay.
please. One of the areas that I was looking at was 2.3 progress reports. And so I was thinking, why, it's kind of related to our goal number 1, why are kids not being successful? And what can we do to support that? So do we have any policies in place? Do we have a curriculum looking at it? Do we have a committee? What kind of data do we have? What can we do to move kids out of that progress report? So.
Taking good notes, for the committee there. Let's go ahead and go on to goal 3 if we can. And again, just like the other one, if we didn't get to something you wanted to share, just send it to me.
So I'm just going to say that goal 3, item number 2 is actually, I asked for this item to come to the board for a couple of reasons, but one of them is because of, even though it has its downsides, and we're going to talk about that, but it's about access and inclusion for the whole community and how to reduce the barrier. In this case, the systemic barrier is the at-large voting and how much it costs to campaign throughout the whole district. So that's an example of the board's work that is addressing this goal. Trying to, again, look at things that we've taken for granted, that are status quo of why we do them the way we do them, but then realizing that they're actually putting up barriers to people to participate. So that was my example. So now I don't need to give you another one. This is number 3, yeah. So, I'm sorry, Steve, what did you say? Yeah, I was just saying that that is an example, in my mind, of trying to reduce the systemic barriers to equity and inclusion. So, does anyone have any other ideas?
I have some examples.
Okay.
We're already in the process of doing this, updating the equity policy. So, that was one that we're already in the process of doing, so that was like a natural one I identified. I thought maybe an action item would be a quarterly review of the CCEIS, just an update or, how we're doing on that. Another thought I had was auditing. I already mentioned it earlier for goal 1, but also more specific. Board policies related to systemic barriers specifically, in addition to the equity policy. And then this is more of like an action. I was really excited about what the district's doing with the book club, on cultural proficiency. I just thought it'd be really cool if perhaps the board participated in some sort of additional equity conversations beyond the actual training that will be provided to us by the consultant, and then having some conversations, whether it be another work session on how we can make more action items based upon the equity as a board. So those were my thoughts.
Yeah,
and I have this all written down, so I'll send it to you.
Yeah, do, please. Keep in mind also that part of the work that you do is in that first week of December when you go to CSBA, and there are all kinds of workshops. And so if you target the workshops that you attend to learn about the work that you're trying to accomplish in the district, that's another action that you can track.
Well, I actually was thinking about that myself, and a long time ago, the board members would take a look at the agenda, the workshops that are offered, and strategize about splitting up and who would attend what, and then that way we would maximize the amount of knowledge that we would be bringing back to the board, and I'd like to see us do that again this year. And again, like you said, you could say, okay, there's a strand here, and, you know, we're going to attend this many of that and this many of this, and try to fill as many gaps that where we feel we could use some additional training, so.
This is a very complex, area, obviously, but I feel it's very simple from a board perspective, in my mind, for Mark. It is my goal to understand what these systemic barriers are that exist through the work that we're doing with Nicole and other things, like you're suggesting, Kelly. But it is then our sole responsibility to create or update policies that remove those barriers or reduce those barriers. I mean, that to me is, if we do nothing else out of this whole process, and actions there really are going to be, participate actively in the workshops that we have and so forth, identify other opportunities for, diversity education and that type of thing. And then the KPIs and metrics is clearly, we can count the number of changes we're making related to, so that's why I say this one for me is pretty straightforward in terms of what I feel like my objective would be. So throw that out there.
I would agree with you, Mark, and I would add that I think this one represents the biggest lift for the board, because it really is mostly policy work to make sure that the policies, when we go to deconstruct barriers, it's going to need to be done in the construct of policy development. That's going to be really, really important. It's not just about professional development, right? And so you have a huge role in that particular goal.
I just wanted to add two things: that I want to make sure that I read the book on culture and read the book on grading and equity. So that's going to be one of my action items. But I also thought that I should make sure that I go to schools and visit them for cultural events and make sure that I'm making connections and I'm being inclusive. So that's, we could be more visible.
Been invited to participate in a variety of campus groups, and so people who can attend those things. It would be difficult to do as an entire board, but in the past, I've participated in a community seed group, which is seeking educational equity and diversity. And our staff, many of them have run these committees for parents and teachers, and this was a community group. And so that's, participating in things like that, is great. There's also, workshops on budgeting through, an equity lens, and so we could put in a metric that, we could attend those podcast webinar things and report out on that too. Because that, again, it's like that's the joke, or not joke, the saying is, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities, right? So, yeah.
All right, so send me anything else you have on that one. Let's go to goal 4, real quick. Hey. Okay. So we're on goal number 4. Sorry, everybody.
Well, first of all, I just have to give you all some kudos. HR has been doing an awesome job. When I spoke to the administrators at the Welcome Back Symposium, or Leadership Symposium that was recently held before school started, and I looked around the room, and I was thrilled and pleased to just really see just the diversity in terms of gender, just all across the board, ethnicity, age, a wide variety of diverse faces that I saw in the room. So I really want to give HR a hand, and Superintendent Haglund as well, obviously. for the work that's been accomplished so far. So I had to start with that.
When I think about this, I think about action that we could take as a board to support. For instance, instead of only giving 6 years when a teacher comes on board, maybe we can offer 14, 15, whatever, so we can attract more teachers that might want to come to us.
Well, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, too. You know, the fact that we have started with management in offering benefits, you know, that also diversifies the applicants that we're going to get, because when you are looking, as my son has done, my poor son has used this too many examples lately, but you know, you look at the contracts, right, and you see, and if you're somebody who is young and doesn't have a partner, or has a partner that doesn't have health insurance and you need health insurance, you're not going to consider us, because you need to go to a school district that offers those benefits. And so changing the policies about and the ways in which we do business to remove those barriers to attracting someone of a perhaps different socioeconomic status to our workforce is important.
Also, staff development. I know Janelle offers a lot of staff development. Most teachers that come into a district want to, how can I grow professionally? How can I learn more? How can I become better at my trade? So we need to support that when staff comes to us and says, we want to offer this, or we want to offer this. We should support that.
Yeah, the board and the staff, the whole team, we need to view professional development of it as an investment. We're investing into our team. And it's not just about professional development, it's about mentoring, it's about leadership development, so that as positions open and people can move up, that not that we're just going to give it to them because they're one of our people, but they've been so well trained and so well mentored that they win the interview every single time. That's what we want to see happen in this.
Go ahead.
I just want to add that maybe we should be reviewing policy with a lens of, are we valuing collaboration?
So I was only going to also add that on the conversation about, which President Larson already mentioned, just, you know, looking at other options and strategies to improve with options for increased benefits for the teachers, and, you know, the competitiveness of other districts, and to Trustee Maher's point, you know, other districts offer, you know, a lot of full-day professional development sessions for their teachers, and so other considerations for that ongoing professional development and make it competitive. I mean, I know there's a lot that we're doing, but, you know, I'm a huge advocate for, you know, adult professional development learning and other avenues, especially with additional funding, really capitalize on that. I think would be really important.
Well, that's one of the things that you know, you're getting into weighing that too. So, you know, do you support, do you fund in your budget an additional, instead of 185 workday, do you now move to 186 workday? Or are you going to, do we have enough instructional minutes to embed that professional development within the school year? So having that lens that you just, you know, talked about, and the collaboration lens, how do you get there? You need to collaborate with your employees to figure out how you're going to increase that collaboration time and staff development time too.
Those are all really good. I was struck by the professional culture and collaboration piece, and, you know, good point on that. But I'm just thinking, how can we as a board do? The one thing that popped into my mind is set a good example. And I don't know how you objectify that, but I mean, we need to be, you know, we do, but I mean, we just need to operate professionally all the time and be collaborative in our conversations, in the meetings with the public. I don't know, I'm not so sure what action steps that would be or what KPIs I would put behind that, but I don't know. I just thought, like, what could we do other than maybe looking at policies for supporting collaboration? But I think that is a theme of this particular, beyond the recruiting and retention piece.
Well, I mean, along the lines of investing in staff to make sure that they're able to compete with outside candidates, so they end up being the best candidate. Because we want to hire the best, because of course, as we know, our students deserve the very best. But it's also like develop how management develops career paths for our employees. Like, so, you know, how do you navigate that within a unionized environment when you have out-of-class issues and all those kinds of things, to where you're actually training people to take on the next role? And do you invest in out-of-class pay in order to provide those opportunities? Do you invest in, you know, again, you know, how you get there and what you're willing to support in order to get folks to that position where they're going to be able to be promoted through a competitive process. So.
You could create policies towards that, you know, so that's a good point.
All right, we're going to move off from number 4. Again, send me what you have that you didn't get out, and we're going to look at number 5. Number 5 is sustaining effective customer service, communication, and stakeholder engagement. How could the board help with that?
I'll start. I put down on strengthening stakeholder communication. I really want to go back to a conversation we've had previously about fleshing out common messaging from email communication, from stakeholders. I really have come to love that idea and would love to see how we could make that happen. And then the other one that I had written down was really thinking about how the board could actively participate in any town halls that might be conducted with the community, and perhaps, you know, be a keynote speaker on a particular board policy topic that might be related to the town hall as like a presenter or something of that sort, in addition to attending town halls, were my 2 thoughts.
You know, to me, the word effective is the key word here. And so we do all these things, but how do we measure that effectiveness, and how does the board improve that? The idea of us together coming up with the single voice of the board is a way of improving effectiveness, because in a sense, you're not getting 5 different answers to something which you shouldn't have anyway. But, you know, you are really honing the right message there. So that was a great one. I hadn't even thought about that. But effective to me means you get the right message to the right people at the right time, and that they receive the message. So I'm just thinking, you know, what could the board do towards that? But anyway, yeah, those are just throwing out some. I don't have an answer.
Well, I was just thinking that we could be more visible too, like we
Yeah.
could be visiting sites. I don't know if there's a certain number of times, I don't know what past has been, or, you know, attending town halls, coffee, Zoom, I don't know, just be more open and being willing to listen. And also, how do we measure that people feel like they're being heard? I don't know what the answer is
Was
to
the
that.
message received?
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to see is, I know that we're all assigned schools. Some of us, it's much easier to get out to schools. We have people at work. So maybe some type of sharing, in other words, if Joan or Mark or Kelly, everybody says, Steve, I can't get there because I'm working all this week. I got budget stuff I have to do, or I have stuff for work. Can you get to a site for me? Because I try to make it to a site at least once every month and a half or 2 months. But some people can't, and it's legitimate because they can't, because they're working. I'm fortunate, I'm not. I mean, I'm not working. So I would like, I know that when I visit the school, especially when I give them advance notice, they all appear to like it. I don't ask for a tour necessarily, but they like to talk and share and maybe ask for something that they might be able to get. So I'd like to see us do a better job as a board getting out there to the sites. I know that Dave gets out all the time, certainly.
Well, and you brought something to our district which we haven't been able to do recently, of course, which is I wouldn't call them, they're not regular board meetings because we're not engaging in this discussion, but we're out at the And they're not really town halls either. What are we, I don't even remember what they're called.
They were called board meetings in the community because we did agendize them.
Yes, but they had a community, they had a different name. Anyway, so I would like to see us do those again, and you know, they were well received. People liked the less formal aspect, and because we weren't allowed to really talk about it, they could ask questions and the staff could answer the questions. But we were there as obviously representatives and hearing their concerns. Yeah. Yep, so I definitely want us to start doing that again, or I would like to start doing that again. We don't have them scheduled yet. So I think that would be great, and,
I think
you know,
Patrick's
rotating.
taking notes too.
Patrick's taking notes, thank you. Yeah, I find it, you know, having been a board member when I was not working and now working, it is different, and I don't get to do things the way I used to do them, and sometimes it's very disappointing to me. And other times it's like, well, that's, you know, that I don't think it's reasonable to expect that every board member that serves on a city council member or a school board, you know, is either retired or stay at home, working from home kind of job. But on the other hand, you know, it is disappointing when we can't make things, and so I would like to say that, I mean, obviously school happens at a certain time, and that can't be changed, but I would like to ask that when there are things like groundbreakings and different things, that they not be scheduled at 9 o'clock in the morning, when people who are supposed to be at work are not available. So whenever possible, I would like those things to be, you know, again, maybe moved around to different times so that there are working families also who might want to attend, who can come to those things, you know, after work or before work kinds of schedules. So, you know, and then the communication part, I'm not necessarily saying that we need an additional staff person, but, you know, that's true of some boards. They have a dedicated staff person to work with them to work, for example, on the messaging and, you know, what is the message. The amount of emails that we get, and we talked about this at the board workshop before, and I know Kelly's more interested in this now. You know, it is, I'd like to change the norm. I'd like to see the expectation for how those communications are handled done a little differently, because there's been in the past a certain expectation that all board members are going to reply to all these emails, and that's just not reasonable. And it's also divisive, because even though we're, you know, pretty much on the same page on most of our decisions in the last year for sure, there are going to be times when we have differences of opinion, and you're getting one message from one person, even though we're supposed to be representing the board. So I would like to have the board work on that process.
We're done with Goal 5, and now we're going to transition to the next part of our governance workshop, which is our Mr. Sheikh Oslami and the election discussion.
Great. Good evening, board, community, and staff. So tonight we're going to talk about the California Voting Rights Act and board elections. And how that process works. And to help us with that, we have our attorney from DWK, William Tunnick, who will provide us a presentation on the CVRA and the process that it will take for that transition from an at-large to trustee by area, if that is the will of the board. And hopefully after that presentation and some Q&A, we're looking for some direction from the board in regards to this item. So with that, I'm going to ask William, are you available? And if you could cast your presentation and take it from here.
Yeah, be happy to do that. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with the board tonight. I'll go ahead and bring the presentation up. Hopefully everybody can see that. Again, my name is William Tunick with Dennis Oliver Kelly, and I know the purpose of this presentation tonight is to talk a little bit about the California Voting Rights Act, how it applies to school districts, specifically your district, and what some of the options are before the board regarding board elections. And we're going to kind of start from the beginning with the CVRA. Some of you may have some familiarity with it already, but want to make sure that we've all got the same information. So kind of starting back at the beginning, the difference between what we call at-large and by trustee area elections. And right now, as you know, your district has what are called at-large elections. That's where everybody, all voters, I should say, in a district vote for all 5 board members. So you have elections, either 2 seats or 3 seats every 2 years, everybody votes. And that's how the 5 members of the board are chosen, which is by far the way that the large majority of school districts, even at this point, still elect board members. The policy reason behind the CVRA, and what we're going to just kind of illustrate with these next 2 slides, is how a difference in election systems can impact the outcome of an election in some cases, and we'll talk about what that means. So, for example, for this hypothetical, we have a district here on the left. We have 15, either they're 15 voters, 1,500, 15,000, doesn't make a difference. And we've split them and said that they're in 2 groups, whether that be race, ethnicity, language, whatever groups they're in. You've got the voters in the blue or the red boxes. I think in the printout they might be in green. I apologize for that. But there are 2 groups. There's 8 in one, 7 in the other. And if we make an assumption, and I realize this is a big assumption, but if we make an assumption that those voters are going to vote the same way, that correlates with their membership in that group. If you run at-large elections, what you get, as you can see in this chart here, is that in all 5 elections, the outcome is going to reflect the preference of the majority, right? It'll be 8-7. So even though the voters are almost narrow or evenly split in the district, at the end of the day, all of those elections are going to go the same way. Now, if we take that same district, the same voters, the same preferences, but we go to trustee area elections or by trustee area elections, should clarify, you can see how the results of the election change, right? So here we've taken the district, we've created trustee areas A, B, C, D, and E, so 1 trustee area per trustee, and divided up the district into those. And so in by trustee area elections, each area, the voters in that area elect 1 member of the board, and the member has to live in that area. And what that means is instead of essentially 5 elections across the district, you have 5 elections in each, or 1 election in each of the 5 areas, you know, similar to how you have your state legislative districts, county board of supervisors, that type of thing are these types of elections. They usually call them district elections. We call them by trustee areas for school districts. And you can see how by doing that, it changes the results of the election, right? Now the majority is winning in 3 of those elections in B, C, and D, whereas the other, in this case, the voters in the blue boxes are winning in seats 1 and 5, or A and E. So that's kind of the policy idea behind the CVRA, is that by just making that change in how the election system is set up, you can actually change the results of the election and allow perhaps a minority group to influence or to have their preferences expressed in the results of an election in a way that is not happening with at-large. And that's ultimately where the prohibition in the CVRA comes from, is that idea. But there's a big caveat here, right? Which is when I started this, I said, we're making an assumption about how voters vote, that their voting is going to correlate with their membership in, again, either a racial, ethnic, or language group. And what that's called, from a technical perspective, what the law calls that is racially polarized voting. So what the CVRA says is where you have racially polarized voting, so where you have that correlation, that's when at-large elections may be prohibited by the California Voting Rights Act. That's not to say that all uses of at-large elections are prohibited. In fact, there's maybe cases where they're not. But in the cases where you have racially polarized voting, which does happen, it's not that hard to find evidence in most places. In that case, then the at-large elections may violate the CVRA, and the way to essentially immunize any local agency, whether it's a city, county, special district, or school district, from that liability is to switch to by trustee area elections. Those are immune from challenge under the CBRA. And I think one thing that's difficult when we talk about the CBRA compared to some types of other requirements out there for elections is there's no hard and fast deadlines as far as, or even bright lines as far as compliance. So a few years ago, you may remember there was another law that came out that said, if you have your board elections in odd years, if your turnout in those elections is a certain amount below, a numerical amount below what the turnout is in general elections, then you have to make a change, and you have to do it by, I think it was 2022. So that was something that boards could look at and say, okay, do we meet this? Here's what we have to do. Here's when we have to do it. The CBRA isn't set up that way. It's much more gray than that. And unfortunately, really the remedy or the kind of the mechanism for enforcement is ultimately litigation. The CBRA allows an individual to bring a CBRA challenge to contest that district elections are in violation of the CBRA, and also allows for award of attorney's fees in those cases, which we've seen in pretty much every case. So in some cases, it ends up being a little bit of the tail wagging the dog, but unfortunately, that's the way the law is set up. And really, even though the law has been around since 2001, we've only got really 2 cases that have gone up to the Court of Appeal to kind of give us an understanding of what the courts are going to say about the CBRA. One was the city of Santa Clara that went up on appeal at the end of last year, where the city lost on appeal. And we've got the city of Santa Monica, which actually prevailed on appeal, but then that case got taken by the California Supreme Court. And we expect that decision later this year. I think ultimately they will most likely find that the city of Santa Monica is also in violation of the CBRA. And what that means from a practical perspective is it's difficult. We don't have an example to point to say this is the standard you can use to defend against a CBRA challenge, because we haven't had that case come down yet from a court of appeal that we can sort of model or determine where that line is for a defense. As I mentioned, there's not really a timeline, and actually before 2017, there was no sort of timeline or really process involving the CBRA. There were several school districts that maybe had never talked about it, and before you know it, they got a lawsuit saying, if you transition now, we'll only charge you $100,000 or something like that. The legislature in 2017 revised the law to kind of create this pre-litigation process, and also a way for districts to give themselves sort of a safe harbor to make the transition if that's something they wanted to do voluntarily. And what it requires is before somebody files a litigation challenge, they have to provide notice to the district and then wait a certain amount of time. If the board then starts the process, it has either essentially 90 to 180 days to complete it. And if that's the case, then there's a cap of $35,000, which is not a small amount of money, but it's still a cap on the amount that the individual who sent the letter can claim in reimbursement for attorney's fees. Alternatively, if the board adopts an intent resolution proactively before there's any letter, it still gets that, it benefits from the safe harbor period, again, that 90, 180 days essentially, where it can make the process, or where it can make the transition and cannot be subject to any sort of litigation demand letter at all. One thing that I think is there's been a lot of discussion about right now is the impact of the census data. And I think that's why a lot of boards, and perhaps including yours, are looking at this right now. Is the census data came out, or is actually coming out pretty much as we speak. It started about last week. It should be mostly out in the next couple of weeks. And why that's important is because all of the analysis, the map drawing, everything we've been talking about is all based on the data that comes from the census. And obviously we only get new data every 10 years. So in that respect, it impacts what districts, when you go through the process, what information you're using. The other thing that it does is for districts that have trustee areas. So I think probably the closest districts to yours, I believe Dublin, San Ramon Valley, and I think Fremont, maybe 3 of the closest that have trustee areas. So you will be seeing, I think they've already started the process of redistricting. So that means taking a look at their trustee area maps and making sure that the maps are still good based on this new data. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a minute. But there is no direct requirement between the census and the transition. So in other words, for districts that have already adopted trustee areas, they're required to review those areas and possibly make changes. But for districts that are still using at-large elections, there's no direct requirement off the census to make the transition at this time. I think the combination of probably a lot more focus on the issue because of redistricting, and also there were a lot of school districts that looked at this issue in 2018, 19, maybe not so much in 20. I think everyone was busy with other things, but looked at it in those years and said, well, we may want to do this, but why would we do it now when we know come 2021, we're going to have to redraw the maps anyway. We'll just wait for that data, and when it comes, we'll do it then. So I think you will see a decent number of districts. And like I said, right now, probably 400 or 500 districts in the state use trustee areas. That number is probably quadrupled from what it was, say, 7 or 8 years ago. But still, the majority are using at-large elections. So there's definitely still a split between districts. So really looking at it overall, there's kind of two options, and depending on where you find yourself, and you're still in this top category, which is if you haven't received a letter. Does the board want to maintain the current at-large elections, or does it want to transition to by-trustee area elections in the near term? And I think it's important when we talk about this option, obviously what I'm talking about today is the legal issues. What does the CBRA require? What is the legal process? But the way that the board members are elected is much more than a legal question, right? It's a big policy question for the board, I think, to determine. And I've heard a lot of pros and cons about at-large elections versus by trustee area elections, and why one might work better or the other for a district. And that's something the board really ultimately has to decide. But I think what we're doing today is just providing that legal context and overlay for the CBRA requirements. And if the board decided to take that second option and make the transition to trustee area elections, what that process would look like. So I want to focus on that next and talk a little bit about that process in case that's a direction the board is interested in going. So that transition process is really broken into 3 phases, what we call a pre-map phase, map development, and then implementation. As you can tell, really what this process is all about is actually drawing and developing the maps. Adopting a resolution saying we're going to go from at-large to trustee areas is a pretty simple thing to do. Determining actually where those lines, where those trustee area boundaries are going to get drawn, those 5 trustee areas, that's what takes the time and effort and is really the challenging piece of this process. So you start with this pre-map phase, and part of why you do it, there's 2 reasons you do this. One, there's some preliminary things you have to do to get the process started. The other reason is the law requires that if an agency going through this process, that they hold 2 public hearings before they look at any maps. So that's why we call them pre-map hearings. But what you would do in this phase is you would adopt that intent resolution saying essentially the board's going to make this transition, and this is sort of a timeline for when it's going to do it. You'd retain a demographer who would be the one who would have access to the information. The mapping software would walk the board and the district through that process. And then you would have your 2 public hearings, which would probably include presentations about, essentially what is the process going to look like, and start trying to get some public input and also direction from the board about what they want to see in the maps once you start drafting maps. Second phase is that actual map adoption. And really what this is a sort of a cycle of 3 hearings where the demographers are preparing draft maps, you're posting them online, there's feedback from the public, and then there's direction from the board on what about a certain map or an option that the board likes or wants to see changed, or their combinations of things, all of that type of stuff. That's what's happening in these 3 hearings, eventually resulting in adoption. I know at the bottom there's a struck out piece regarding the SBE waiver, and we'll talk about what that is at the end and why it's struck here. I did want to talk a little bit about drawing the lines, because obviously, like I said, that's sort of the meat of this process. If you make the transition, is coming up with those trustee area boundaries. And there's kind of 2 fundamental legal things that we're concerned about when we draw maps, and then there's a variety of other criteria you can use to kind of decide where the line should be. The 2 federal requirements are equal population and concerns compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, or the FVRA, as opposed to the CVRA. Equal population, as I mentioned before, when the census comes out, that triggers redistricting. The reason that happens is because there's a constitutional requirement that when you have trustee areas that they're population balanced. And the reason for that is so that if you've heard the, one person, one vote, the idea is that all votes should have equal weight. And if you end up with trustee areas that are not population balanced, what you're essentially doing is weighting one vote more than another. So it's important, whether you're districting for the first time or you're redistricting, that the trustee areas are equal in population, which means roughly within 10% between the least and the most populous trustee area. Usually not an issue. Mostly we see maps that are 4, 5, 6% deviation at the most. But that's one thing that is an absolute given that you have to comply with. And so, for example, if you look at the illustrations here, the one on the left, you can see why that would not survive that test, right? Because you have different numbers of voters in each of the areas. And so, for example, the voter in area E is going to have much more influence over the board than a voter in area B. So that's problematic. You couldn't have a map like that. The other consideration, which is a little bit more complex, is the federal voting rights, and that relates to the use of race in drawing maps. And it's a little bit of a Goldilocks situation where essentially if you can draw a trustee area where a minority group is a majority, federal law essentially requires that. At the same time, you can't draw the areas in such a way that tries to either split or kind of compress minority voters to dilute what the law says to dilute their influence. So, for example, in that middle illustration, you can see how we've got some kind of funky looking lines, and most of the voters in the blue boxes have been drawn into one area and otherwise have been split so that they're not a majority in any other area. That would be a map that might be suspect under the federal law. So the one on the right in this illustration is one that you have equal population, you don't have the cracking and packing of the minority group as it's called. And also those lines honestly just look like they're more reasonable, which at the end of the day, sometimes the eye test is really sort of the best way to do it. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who have not seen this before, that illustration there on the right, that is the origin of the term gerrymander. That's the district from, I believe it was a Massachusetts state Senate race. And so, at the end of the day, if you can put eyes and feet on it, it's probably not a good trustee area district. But I wouldn't worry about any of that with the boards we work with. So as I mentioned, though, you have those two basic requirements, and then you have, in addition, what we call traditional redistricting criteria. This means things, for example, could be geographical boundaries, man-made boundaries, other political boundaries, compactness, continuity, what we call communities of interest. And the easiest way to think about this for school districts is usually attendance boundaries. Those are communities of interest that either we want to try to keep together, or sometimes boards like to actually split those so that you have multiple trustees representing areas that attend different schools. So there's different ways to handle that. The other thing that's perfectly legal that boards you can consider is the location of incumbents on the board. And the reason you can consider that is because we shouldn't be using, the courts have said essentially, shouldn't be using the districting process to remove somebody from the board. If the voters want somebody to be on the board, that's their decision. If they don't, that's also the decision. But this process shouldn't be used to draw a map that prevents somebody from running. So that's why that information can be used, can't be the overriding factor, but it can be something used when the board draws those lines. There's a lot more to it, but that's something that if the board's interested, we can talk more about later. And actually, just as an example, here are two trustee area boundary maps, one in Southern California, one Northern California. These are from a couple of years ago, just to kind of give you an idea of what some of the maps look like. Pretty straightforward. You do end up with some kind of interesting areas when you don't have a lot of population. You can end up with some really large geographic areas, and then some real small areas just because that's where your densest population is. You can also end up with lines that look a little bit odd, and that's because you're drawing off census blocks that don't always aren't perfectly square for the most part. So you go through, you draw your maps. What's the final phase? Implementation. It's board approval by the board of the maps and the decision to make the transition. That then goes to the County Committee on School District Organization, which has to hold a hearing in the district and would also then approve the maps. Now, as of today, there's then a requirement that approval from the county committee becomes the call for an election in the district, up or down, yes or no, should we make this change? The reason you don't ever hear about any of those elections is because they can and they are waived by the state board. Probably 300 plus of these elections have been waived. Given the fact they waived every single one, the legislature this year amended the code to say, instead of calling an election, which we know you're just going to ask for a waiver of anyway, the county committee can adopt language saying that pursuant to the CVRA, there's no need for an election. That law goes into effect January 1 of this coming year. So that's why we left the information in the slide, but practically speaking, that's going to become a nullity here pretty quickly. Last thing I wanted to mention on implementation on the board itself. So whenever you make this type of change, there's no immediate impact. So in other words, it doesn't affect the terms of current board members. What instead happens is as your elections or your terms turn over, so the seats that may come up in 2022, if you did it before then, those seats would be elected by trustee area, right? And so then between 2022 and 2024, you'd have board members elected under both processes. And then in 2024, when those terms end, those seats would come up under trustee area elections as well. So it takes 2 cycles, but it doesn't automatically kick anybody off the board, even if you end up in a situation where you have multiple trustees in one trustee area. It kind of takes effect as those 2 election cycles pass in the 4 years following after adoption. So I think that was, I apologize if I was going pretty quickly there, but if there's any questions about either the CVRA or the process, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, I have a question for the board, though. We do have one public comment. Would you rather do our questions first or take the public comment? Okay. Oh, let the public comment. Is everyone okay with that? So Patrick, I believe we have one public comment on this. Why don't we go ahead?
Yes, President Larson, our public comment is from Jackie Kota. So Jackie, if you're with us, go ahead.
Jackie, are you there? Ms. Cota? No?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I wanted to make a comment about the equity section of the agenda, 12.2.
The item that we're on right now, number 2, is our California Voting Rights Act and trustee elections. Is that what you wish to speak to?
No, I wanted to make a comment on 12.2. That's what I submitted my card for. Thank you.
All right, in that case, we have no public comments on this item.
Okay, I don't know what 12.2 is if it's not this. All right, Patrick, would you work with Ms. Cota and find out what her item is that she wishes to speak on, and we'll go ahead with trustee questions. All right, so questions for the speaker. Steve, did you have something?
I did have one question. If we start rotating into this procedure, if some people move off, so we have by district, if someone is elected to the district, but someone on the board is in that district, what happens the next time? Do they need to run for a different district?
Yeah, so it can get a little bit complicated with the sequencing. In an ideal situation, the trustee areas are drawn in such a way that the board members are spread out, essentially, that you can have, you don't have that situation. If you do, there's one of 2 things that can happen. Either somebody could take the option to run earlier if they want to stay on the board in the other trustee area, or like you mentioned, they may stay on the board and overlap with somebody and then not be able to seek re-election if their seat has a different trustee area. So that's something, it can get a little complicated, but we try our best usually not to have that happen, because again, the idea here is not to remove any individuals off the board.
So I'd like to extend on Trustee Maher's question, because that was my question. So if we do approve and put a resolution to make this happen in 2022, there'll be 2 seats open. So that could be 5 trustee areas. Could a candidate from any of the 5 areas run for those 2 seats?
No, so when you adopt the plan, along with the trustee areas, there's a sequencing that goes with them. So essentially the 5 trustee areas would get assigned to either a 2022 or a 2024 election. And the areas that get assigned to the 2022 election would be the ones up at that election. The other 3 would go at the following election. Again, if it works out, you generally aim to have the 2 board members in 2 areas that are up in 2022. Those 2 seats would be the ones assigned to that election, so that we're not, again, trying to create the least amount of turnover on the board, at least as a result of the election sequencing.
So to recap what you're saying, so if there's 2 seats up in 2022, those seats for those areas would be the only voting areas, is what you just said?
And that is a big difference. And I think that's something that members of the public sometimes don't understand about this process, is that, they're used to voting every 2 years for either 2 or 3 board members. But if you adopted this, that would mean that in 2022, only the voters in those 2 areas would be voting, and they'd only be voting for 1 board member each. And that board member would have to be somebody who lives in that area.
Okay.
Does a trustee have to live within that district?
Yes, they do.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about why I asked the superintendent to bring this forward. I have sort of a love-hate relationship with by trustee areas. I can talk about the cons. I'm going to do that first. One of the cons, in my viewpoint of this, is that unless you're careful about how you design the maps, you can end up with people voting only for things that are going to help the school that's in their area, for example. And so it's important, in my opinion, it's important to take that into consideration when you're designing the maps. It also lowers the bar for recalls. So someone of a different viewpoint might see that as a good thing. But I actually see that as a negative, because I think that over time it takes a while. This is a hard job. I think our new trustees would agree to that. And it takes a while to get your sea legs, and then it takes a while to accumulate the capital among the community to make a decision that's not necessarily popular, right? And so when the bar is lowered, because the number of signatures required for a recall in a by trustee area is small, you are more susceptible to, when you make a decision that you feel is in the best interests of all students in your district, you are at risk for the community members within your trustee area deciding to recall you. So those are the 2, what I consider to be the downsides, or the hate part of the love-hate relationship. The love part for me of this is, in a community like ours, we have certain standards of how elections are run, and for a newcomer to beat an incumbent in this town, it takes about $10,000. And that's a pretty high bar. And you are campaigning, as you guys know and have experienced yourselves, over the entire town. It's also hard, as we were discussing earlier, to maintain those engagement with your constituents when you have 42,000 of them versus a smaller number. So I see by trustee areas improving access for people who might want to run for the board, but who see the financial obligation as a barrier. There's another policy consideration about how we reduce the systemic barriers of people having to pay that exorbitant filing fee with the county office, that we can have a policy discussion about at a future time. But to me, this is one way to improve access. Historically in this town, the vast majority of school board members come from the center of town, quite frankly, the Walnut Grove attendance boundary. I can take you back 35 years and show you the number of folks that have come from those communities, myself included. But what we want to see is we want to see representation. You know, Mark lives in another area and was a Foothill, had Foothill students. Mary Jo, you live in another area, that's great. But one thing that concerned me in this last election, and don't get me wrong, I'm extremely delighted to be working with the winners of that election, but we did have 2 people running for seats who were members of our community that is a large percentage of our student body and our increasing demographics, which we're going to see when we get the results of the census, and neither were successful in achieving the at-large vote. So, you know, I see this again as also timing. We're getting the census data. That's great. We have an election coming up with 2 people. I'll just speak for myself. I'm not running again, so there'll be an open seat anyway. And we don't even live in near areas, so there's another advantage to that. We're in the middle of talking about boundaries work with our demographer for our school boundaries. This is a really great time to do the boundary work that will need to be done for the districts in conjunction with the boundary work that we're going to be having meetings about and having conversations about for school boundaries. So that's my love-hate relationship with it. I asked the superintendent to have a presentation so that the full board could consider and ask the questions and decide whether it's something we want to do. We've not received a letter. If we get the letter, districts don't win. You just have to pay the lawyer the $35,000 and do this work anyway. So I felt like we had an opportunity to do it in a thoughtful manner with the most up-to-date census data and with the work that we're going to be doing on school boundaries. So that's why we're talking about it tonight.
I have a question, though, on the drawing the lines again. So I'm just thinking about our lovely community here and, you know, having a hard time thinking that there's tremendous disparities in demographics across the, I mean, I may be completely wrong, and I would relish the demographer pointing that out or whatever, but in a community that there isn't, you know, clear demographic distinctions or anything, is it just a numbers game then?
Yeah, to answer that question, I mean, there's a demographer can do an analysis of, when I talked about the racially polarized voting, that is a statistical analysis that can be done.
Yeah.
And it's a comparison of voting history, basically voting history by precinct against ethnicity by census block, and they can sort of correlate those two and try to tell you, you know, sort of is there evidence of it or not. Realistically, probably if you look hard enough in most places in California, you'll find some evidence. And unfortunately, the way the CBRA is set up, it's less concerned with whether or not you have a numerically large enough minority to constitute, you know, like in my illustrations, we had those groups that would, if you drew trustee areas, they would become a majority of that area. It's a majority-minority area. The California Voting Rights Act doesn't require that be the case. So it may be that you couldn't draw those areas even if you went to trustee areas, but the CBRA that's not part of the analysis. It's only, is there that correlation in the voting, and are you using at-large elections? That's pretty much the end of the analysis. So I hope that answered the question.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to say, I mean, you know, I was actually honestly supportive of this before I heard you talk, but your rationale, Joan, really struck home with me in terms of the cost and the, you know, the opportunity to get people and spread out the, not diversity of the people, I mean, that's important, but, you know, in terms of what area they're focused on and whatnot, rather than congregating in a certain area. So yeah, and I too will not be running again. And so, there would be two sites open in very different locations. So, but yeah, no, and then the heading off the potential, not lawsuit, but, challenge or whatnot to that is certainly very appealing to me, because I do think it may become inevitable at some point, so.
What happens when an area doesn't have someone running?
So if there's an election, say Area 1, and nobody files, it becomes automatically a vacancy, and the board actually appoints somebody, but the appointment also has to be from the trustee area. So at some point, you've got to, either by election or by appointment, you've got to find somebody from that trustee area. And to be perfectly honest, in talking with some districts, that's actually been the one downside they've actually seen happen. After the fact that they've gone to trustee areas and they've had trouble finding candidates sometimes from certain parts of the district. That's not the majority of the cases, but it does happen.
Yeah, the word find I don't like, because all of us wanted to be on the board. Find, that means I'm going to coerce someone into, would you please,
So I guess my question is, well, it really kind of goes back to what Trustee Maher said. So just to restate, if someone doesn't run in a particular area, then it's appointed by the board from that area?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I don't know. I have kind of mixed feelings. I'm practically neighbors with President Larson, so how does it work when two trustees are really close to each other and one seat's up and one's not? How does that work? Could a whole nother area be somewhere else, or what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, and I would say though that to the extent that you have, if there's incumbent board members who are not planning on seeking re-election, that can be, that to the timing point, that is a very helpful factor from timing, because it essentially gives the board two free areas to work with to draw areas where there may not currently be incumbents, and essentially assign those seats assign the seats of the individuals who are not seeking re-election to those areas, so that we're not in a situation where we've got someone running, not in an area they don't live anymore. So, or the area is outside where they live. So that would be probably, if you've got folks in 2022 who are not running, that would give us some flexibility. Realistically, if you've got two trustees that are neighbors, at some point they can get drawn to the same trustee area, and then the choice is either to run against each other or not to run again, or to move to another area. Those are the three options, which are
luckily we're not in the same cycle.
Yeah. Well, and that's like I said. So then it kind of depends on how it gets sequenced. If it's sequenced for the earlier cycle, then somebody can run early, or they cannot run, and then when their seat comes up, if that seat was, for example, if it's sequenced for 2022 and the other trustee there is there till 2024, they could either run in 2022, or if not, when their seat comes up in 2024, it's going to be in a trustee area they don't live in, and they won't be able to run for re-election. That's just the reality of it. But again, we try to, especially if you have individuals not running again, that's usually something we can avoid.
Maybe you said this, but let's say the next election, Joan is not running, and Kelly is, or not running. Kelly's not running because she's still on the board. Can you move Joan's, theoretically, her district to another district?
Yes, that's exactly what you would do. Is you would use that district, you would probably assign to someone where there wasn't an incumbent running, and then where you had the incumbent with the 2024 seat, you'd likely assign that area to be a 2024 election. And again, the idea there is you could minimize the disruption to the voters' choice to put those people on the board.
So, all right, thank you. That makes me feel a little better. So, I would just say, from an equity standpoint, I am definitely in favor for it, and really support that. Not so, just my personal experience, not so much a cost. I was really proud to run a low budget campaign. So I just want to say that for anyone who wants to run, don't let the money stop you, because you can find other ways to campaign. But, as long as we're very thoughtful on the boundary outlines, I do want to state that, we're still recovering from from COVID. And I want to make sure that we are mindful of the time. And so, as President Larson said, we are, I think the bigger emphasis we should be thinking about is the redistricting for our student boundaries and the overflow issues that we've been dealing with. And so if we can be thoughtful and hit two birds with one stone, that makes sense. But definitely, anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Mary Jo, did you have anything? No? And I don't believe we have any public comment again for this item. We figured out that the speaker was trying to speak on the last item, so we'll deal with that in a few minutes. So you're seeking direction tonight. Would we like to have the superintendent bring back an intent resolution to the board for our consideration?
I would, and especially given the circumstance of the two open districts, yeah, I think this is the right time.
All right, hearing no other comment, you've got your direction. So can I go back to the speaker wanted to speak on item 12A1 and a particular goal on that item, I believe. Patrick, is the speaker available?
Joan, the speaker was actually looking at a previous board agenda.
All right, well, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that she had her opportunity if she wishes to speak. All right, so now we have, we're still on our governance workshop, and we have item 3, and this is also my item. This is report discussion and possible action on joining the Asian Pacific Islander School Board Member Association. So I received this invitation from the Asian Pacific Islander School Board Members Association, which is just an association of school board members similar to the California Latino School Board Members Association, or the, there's the small school district board member association. It does not involve our, that we have to attend. We're not required to attend anything, although it would allow us to, at CSBA, to network with other school board members that are members of this association. We, again, have a large student body of Asian Pacific Islander students, and the work that this organization is doing, we would be able to learn from and learn about what's going on and affecting those students. And they have, it's for $100, the entire board can be a member of the association. So I really wanted to bring it to you to see if this was something you were interested in. As we are looking at the different types of groups that, we might be participating in, I thought this might be a good one.
I just wanted to comment. Thank you. I also got the email, but really appreciate you taking that initiative to bring it to the board, and I fully support it.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
It's been moved and seconded to join as a board the Asian Pacific Islander School Board Members Association. Mary Jo?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Steve? Aye. Mark?
Aye.
And aye. Thank you, guys. I look forward to meeting all of the association members at CSBA in December. Great. Do we need a little break before we move on, or is everybody okay? All right, let's keep going. We're on item 12B, report discussion on the business services update of the summer projects. Mr. Shikolsami.
Great. I'm very excited to present this work. I'm just going to broadcast it up here. Oops. Great. So, wanted to present some of the accomplishments of the summer, and I think that it's really a story of a team working together with diligent planning, and execution over the summer, and extreme hard work and collaboration and teamwork throughout this summer to make these accomplishments happen. So I just want to highlight that for the Business Services Division. We have, 5 departments included in the Business Services Division, including the facilities, the operations, CNS, technology, and our fiscal team. So during the year, we planned out to replace 100 of our HVAC units and thousands of miles of roofing. These projects were not easy. Our team, including Van Pelt and John and others, worked extreme long hours and even on the weekends to pull off these projects. And we have better functioning HVAC units throughout the district. One of the other important milestones that we were able to achieve is all our thermostats throughout the district are now on a smart system, and we can monitor them and manage them and also look at the CO2 levels in the classrooms. And so that's given us the ability to anticipate any problems that are happening even before they are communicated to us. And so we have over 1,500 HVAC units in the district. So at any given moment, there are going to be issues, but through this system and through the dedication, we are trying to resolve them as fast as possible. I think that the multi-layered mitigation measures that we have out there and the investment in the HEPA filters are providing us a sense of security and backup when there is a unit that has an issue. So that was a major accomplishment over this summer, and that work will continue in the coming summers. At Leidixon, we had an incredible amount of work happen. I'm just going to play this while I talk about it because you can see this really neat flyover of that project for those who have not been in that area. So we are working on the kindergarten building, and next is the administration building and library. And in order to do that, we set up 3 temporary portables, and we completed the playground. And you can see a really neat playground with the colored blacktop that really helps the kids know where to be walking and where not to be walking. And so that project is moving smoothly forward. We hope to get the grass in the next few weeks and then continue the project at the other facilities as well. So that was a big push this summer. The other project, again, an extreme great planning by our team in collaboration with the city of Pleasanton. We were able to both do on-site and off-site work. Our dedicated project manager worked long hours and stressful days to ensure that just days before school opening, everything was ready for the new drop-off and pickup. We are making some tweaks to improve it, working with the school site administration, and it won't fully be done until the new building is complete, as a 2-story building is right there in the front of the school. So again, a major accomplishment in a very complicated project over this summer. At Hart Middle School, this is a kind of a drone picture of that project while they were asphalting. And so this parking lot will kind of allow the construction of the new science building to start. And it also allows for additional parking and, most importantly, a new drop-off pickup, which we hope to open in the coming week, which will relieve some of the pressure within the business park area. So again, another important milestone. And in addition to that, it allows for the science buildings to start, which I'm sure all our students and staff are excited about. We continued with our site safety plan. These are small projects, but nonetheless, they're very important and they're time consuming. And so everything went off really well. We do have, again, issues with some supply chain issues, and some of the gates are not yet in, but I think in the next few weeks, those issues will be resolved. We also did extensive ADA improvements at Hearst as these projects also try to improve some of the pathways to our schools. Another major accomplishment was the district office is now into the 21st century with a voice over IP system, as well as 3 more of our schools. And by the end of December, all the school sites in the district will be on the new system, communicating for both emergency and regular phone, clock bells and speakers. And we continue rolling out the technology in the classrooms to ensure that our teachers have the 21st tools that they need. We, over the summer, completed the majority of the security cameras at Amador and Foothill, and so now we're able to provide greater safety and reduce vandalism at our schools. And there's a whole host of other benefits as we can also look at the traffic patterns at some of the schools and see if there needs to be adjustments. So that will roll out to our middle schools next and our elementaries eventually. Couple of non-bond projects that also saw completion, again, through the work and diligence of our team there. You know, it wasn't just paint the buildings, it was how can we really paint and kind of make a difference. So we were able to get some graphics there. I know John worked closely with the school site, multiple meetings. We had a color consultant helping us. And so I believe Alisal is really looking sharp right off of Santa Rita. And then, I don't really excited about how Foothill looks like. It's just become a beautiful campus with the new blue and some of the grays and whites that we've been able to get there. Again, that was funded through our facility maintenance funds that have been now restored and have been utilized to maintain our schools. This is another flyover of one of the larger buildings, and you can see the old red, Jack-in-the-Box red is gone, and we see the blue coming in. And other facility improvements, again, we began a few years ago evaluating our fields, and over the summer we completed Vintage Hills and Hearst, and I believe this is Vintage Hills, and I think if you were there a few years ago, you wouldn't even be able to play out there. And now that field is really in good condition, and that's some of the work going on. We're also finishing up Amador and Foothill High School, and so the baseball and softball fields will be ready by the end of September. Work continues. Again, this is great work that our director of facilities and construction has been doing with the site, was really to lay the project out at the Harvest Park Preschool. And so I was out there today, and they're starting to pour the concrete and starting to get a really cool ADA playground set up. And then our director of operations has been overseeing the playground replacements at Vintage Hills and Fairlands. And so those are great projects that are ongoing. Lots of repair, lots of work throughout the district, maintaining our schools to that level that we expect them to be at. Our technology department was super busy, so we took back all of the Chromebooks, cleaned them up, got them the new ones distributed, got the elementary schools out, made sure our new teachers, 40 teachers, I think even more than that, had their devices ready on day one. So again, technology department in transition under new leadership was able to do significant work, and we're really excited about moving forward in that department. Again, we can't say enough of CNS. They had an incredible year feeding the children of the community, and they continue that in the summer with their summer program. And now, they're at it again in all our schools, feeding meals to our students. And I think I could easily say that at most of our sites, our food service has doubled. Lines are as long as the eye can see. I was there at Harvest Park today, walking the school site with our assistant principal, and she indicated to me that within 12 minutes they can get everyone through. So they're really efficient, but we do need more staff. So if you're a parent out there and you're interested in working and being close to our students and helping out, we would be very happy if you would apply. Again, fiscal department, closing out the books, making sure all that COVID related funds are being expended, 45-day budget, closing out making sure the CSCA tentative agreement was executed in August. Just an incredible amount of work for that team as well, and all the materials and supplies, making sure that they were delivered for the first day of school. So again, just overall an incredible work by the team in business services. Be happy to answer questions, and I know some of the directors are also available to answer any questions.
Great. Trustee Carrion.
I just want to say that they are beautiful. I love the campuses. But I also want to tell the public about a great story I heard this week about Amador and their security, is that there was a bike that was stolen. And within a couple hours, they were able to notify the police and get the bike back. And it wasn't a student, it was, somebody else in the community that had stolen it. So the security systems are working, and just thank you for your hard work.
Mark?
I am struck by our students deserve the very best, and they've had great teachers and administrators and staff members, but ever since I got on this board, a lot of what's been discussed here has been, I would call it deficit for our district. I mean, to say that you moved the bar is an understatement. I mean, and it's not just I-1. I mean, there's, we talked about deferred painting. I mean, Joan, you probably have the best history about that. But anyway, I just think this is completely awesome all around. I really couldn't be happier. You guys, and it's visible, and oh my gosh, I thank you.
Steve?
I think I mentioned it at the facility meetings the other day, but now I am proud to move to show people around the district. Before your time, certainly in Dave's time, I was embarrassed. I'm not anymore, so thank you.
So Ahmad, I just have one question related to the food services, just for benefit of the public's understanding. The increase of food intake, is it that free service that's available for breakfast and lunch that you're seeing just mass access to the food, and that there's more students that are taking advantage of those services, and that's why we're in a need for seeking for parent volunteers and, more staff to support food services?
I would say yes, and it's also the meals are really good. They taste good. They're very nutritious. They meet all the requirements, and I think that without the meals being really good and tasty, your kids are not going to eat. And so yes, the federal program has allowed us to now offer meals free of charge to all students, regardless of their eligibility. And so I think that given, the challenges our families are facing, not just financial, but just logistical and just getting everyone in, I think having the convenience of the meal program has been a wonderful thing. And so we've seen participation increase, and with increased participation, we need more staff. And then with more staff, we'll be able to reduce some of those lines. And, the superintendent and I have been talking about, can we get more kiosks at the high schools and other places, and yes, we can, and we hope to, but we just have to be able to have the staff to do that.
So, and then just lastly, just to extend gratitude already expressed, but just to reiterate, the amazing work with the facilities and the visuals. I'm definitely appreciative of the big bear on Alice Isle. It really makes the school setting, I think, is something that sometimes maybe not always talked about, but facilities really does make the environment for where our students are walking, passing by, and the rooms that they're sitting in. It makes a huge difference. And so I know there's a lot of talk with the bond and what's been, done, but it's just huge. So thank you.
I'll just add to what's been said. I ditto all of that, but also I just want to give a shout out especially to fiscal services. You're my peeps, and this is the busy time. July 1. It's just nonstop until unaudited actuals. So I just really want to say thank you very much and greatly appreciated. And to do it when you're having to do a retro, On top of that, well done.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, and I think it really, the team is really to be acknowledged, and your support, the board's support, they feel it, the energy changes, and it's that, it's like positive energy keeps feeding it. So I think that the staff are working hard, our contractors, our consultants, everyone really is motivated to really do the very best. Thank you.
Well, great. And with that, I guess we will talk about a little bit of the facilities work with item C, which is an amendment number 2, possible action for Matroscope Engineering Lab for the portable replacement and new classrooms at Foothill.
Go ahead, John.
All right, thank you, Ahmad. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Haglund, Cabinet, and the community. Today is pretty much of a routine board agenda item. This is for an amendment for additional welding for the testing and inspection company, who is Matroscope on Foothill High School. And so periodically during the course of construction, additional testing and inspections are required because when a contractor defines the means and methods of the project, which is completely up to themselves, when the project is bid with the other consultants, such as the testing and inspection, or even the inspectors, the other inspectors, they have to, in essence, kind of guess on the scope of work. And so the contractor, the way they actually get something done is by as what we call means and methods. So sometimes there's gaps, and that's what this is really covering. There was additional welding inspections that were required. Now, we are still looking at whether or not these are re-inspections from a contractor failure to getting something done. So if that is the case, then we will backcharge the contractor accordingly. But we're still looking at that. And so Matroscope submitted their ad services for $39,000 and a little more. And so recommended action is the administration recommends the board to approve amendment number 2 of the agreement for Matroscope at Foothill High School.
Any questions, comments? All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 2 to the agreement for Matroscope for the testing and inspection for the portable replacement and new classroom project at Foothill High School.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the second amendment for $39,677.42. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
McCaughey?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Larson? Aye. And item number D, report discussion, possible action on resolution 2021-2022.05 for interfund borrowing.
Yes, so we spoke about this at the last board meeting slightly when we updated you about our Fund 63. And so again, we used to typically bring this interfund borrowing as a matter of regular course, I thought we should only bring it when we needed to utilize it. And so at this point, for some short-term borrowing for Fund 63, we will need to do some interfund borrowing, and again, as operations return to normal with Kids Club. And some of the increases in fees that we're doing and some of the other adjustments, I believe that this will be a temporary borrowing for this fiscal year, and that towards the latter part of the year, those funds can be returned. So we're seeking that authority in order to be able to make sure we have payroll for Fund 63.
Any questions?
I just have one question. Sorry, I didn't ask this ahead of time. How much will be borrowed roughly?
I don't have the exact amount, but I think it will be in the several $100,000 range at this moment. I could bring back some more.
No, it's okay. But so you're hoping that just for this year, and hoping that with all the like you mentioned, the other plans and strategies, that
Yes.
short term. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can't extend past this year. So is there a motion to approve?
I move approval of resolution 2021-2022.05 for interfund borrowing.
I'll second it.
Okay, all right, so this is well, they're all roll calls at the moment, so trustee Carrion.
Aye.
McCashy.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
And Larson. Aye. All right, report discussion and possible action on revised board policy 6146.1, our high school graduation requirements. Dr. Woodward.
Thank you. Good evening, President Larson, trustees, Superintendent Haglund, Cabinet, and Pleasanton community. This evening, we are bringing forward a revised board policy 61.6.1 pertaining to high school graduation requirements. Staff will request approval to align with CSBA language and CTE graduation requirements. Secondary Director Graywall and Adult and Career Education Director Dr. Nugent III will make a brief presentation. Go ahead, Marta.
Thank you, Dr. Woodward. Good evening, President Larson, Superintendent Haglund, trustees, members of Cabinet, PUSD staff, and community. I'm presenting today with Dr. Amos Nugent, our Director of Adult and Career Education, and we are seeking an update to Board Policy 6146.1 on high school graduation requirements. The revisions are proposed to align with the existing Administrative Regulation 6146.1 and to ensure that all PUSD graduation requirements are accurately reflected in this board policy. In addition, we seek to make PUSD graduation requirements fully compliant with the minimum requirements outlined by the state of California, which since 2013 have allowed for a course in career and technical education to be counted as an alternative to the visual and performing arts or world language graduation requirement. We would like to implement that option for PUSD students as well. Finally, with regards to other changes reflected in the revised board policy, we seek better alignment with model CSBA language. Pending approval by the trustees, these changes would go into effect immediately and would provide all students with an additional option for their path to high school graduation. Any questions?
I don't have a question, just thank you for your hard work on this particular updating of the policy, and a huge advocate for alternatives for students. And I know that was for compliance, but really advocating for career and technical education and options for our students. And thank you for your hard work.
There's some interesting things in here. And one of them is the community service requirement, which is different, right? Allowing student to participate in 20 hours through approved methods over the course of any time between grades 9 and 12. I think that's great. So
It's
anyway.
aligning with what we are already doing.
Yeah. But we did have it stated otherwise, right? Yeah.
Right, but it changed in the last couple of years.
Yeah, good.
I mean,
Anyway.
just as a point of
Most all this
clarification,
stuff
yeah,
is-
exactly. So normally this would have gone to the Board Policy Subcommittee, but due to the timing of the need for coming into compliance with what we currently already do in our graduation requirements, making our board policy reflect that, as well as the compliance issues with the state, we brought it straight to the board. So without going through. I will say, though, that I'm going to ask under my future agenda items that had this policy come to us in a normal fashion, I think it is time to start talking about graduation requirements and the level of which the number of credits and things that we require. So I will ask for that to come back to the Board Policy Subcommittee when we have time.
Jump to that part of the agenda.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd mention that. So with that, are there any other questions or comments on the updated policy? All right, I'll seek a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, the policy. Sorry.
6146.1.
Yes, thank you. 6146.1, high school graduation requirements.
I'll second it.
All right, trustee
And aye.
Carrion. McCashy.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Larson. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Nugent.
Thank you, trustees.
And Director Graywall. Item number F is report, discussion, possible action on the contract between Catherine Davis and PUSD for speech language services. Mr.
Yes.
Dialazzo.
Thank you and good evening again. So before you is a contract for professional services with an individual service provider, Catherine Davis, for the 21-22 school year in the amount of $180,000, not to exceed $180,000. And this provider is a licensed speech and language pathologist, and we are seeking a speech and language pathologist to provide services specifically for our infants from birth to 3 who are eligible for our SELPA's early education program, early start program. Students eligible for this program have been identified as having a low incidence disability. Some of those disabilities are students who are deaf, who may be deafblind, who may be hard of hearing. So this is a very specialized program in need of specialized services. So we're seeking approval of this contract that would be funded out of the SELPA office, and PUSD is the administrative unit of the entire Tri-Valley SELPA, which has 6 other districts as members. As the administrative unit, the funding flows through our department, so we would hire this position that would serve the entire SELPA, the students that would qualify for this program. So we are seeking approval of the contract.
I just have a comment. Just as a parent who had a child that needed these types of services between the ages of 0 and 3, I think this is something really, really important, and really just want to take point that, you know, early intervention and these types of support services for speech pathology and audiology and all the other services is really, really important. So just wanted to highlight the importance of these services.
Any other comments or questions?
No, but I was just curious about the SELPA. Does that mean that other people are helping pay for this, or is it just out of our budget?
That is correct, Trustee carry on. And so the SELPA would share the burden of the expense. We do get grants from the federal government and state for infant services. So I believe that one infant grant would be about $108,000 coming to the SELPA, and so that would help pay for this, and then the rest of the balance of the $180,000 would be shared with the other member districts. That's correct.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the contract between Catherine Davis and PUSD for speech language services.
Second it?
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the contract between Catherine Davis and PUSD for speech language services in an amount not to exceed $180,000 for the 21-22 school year. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
McCashy?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Larson? Aye. All right, last item tonight. This is report discussion, possible action on resolution 2021-2022.04 to excuse the absence of trustee Mark Miller on September 9th, 2021. Just as a little bit of background for our new trustees. So basically, Ed Code requires, technically, there's we're paid by the meeting, if you will. And so if you miss a lot of meetings, there's a way to hold you accountable. Our board has never had the problem with people missing a lot of meetings, but I realized a couple years ago that we really weren't in compliance by officially excusing the member when they have another obligation. The rule is that the board has to deem that to be acceptable in essence. So for example, if you have a student graduating from college and you need to attend their graduation, or you have something come up in your personal life, it's been this practice for the last couple of years to excuse the trustee for, formally through this resolution. And so that's Mr. Miller will be missing the meeting in September due to a vacation. So the board is asked to approve this resolution, formally excusing him. And are there any questions? All right, I'll seek a motion.
I'll seek approval for this motion.
You'll move approval?
Yes.
And I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 2021-2022.04 to excuse Mark on September 9th. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
McCashy?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller? You get to vote.
Aye.
And aye. And aye, 5-0. You get to excuse yourself. That sounds like a song. So now we're at the last bit where we have reports and requests. Are there any board reports for any items? Trustee Carrion?
I just have a request, and that when we went to instructional minutes, we somehow lost the first couple of weeks of being let out early for teachers to do assessments. And I know I've been at Alisal, and the teachers are having a really hard time getting them all in. So I'd like you to maybe check in with them. How are they getting all their assessments done? And I know, like, for example, Donlin has like 4 minimum days, but other schools don't. So maybe I would like to talk later about how we can streamline the process. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Any other reports or requests?
I just have a report.
Okay.
Attended the Economic Vitality Committee meeting the other week, and just great discussions about how to streamline the work with the Tri-Valley ROP and career and education. And ultimately, the discussions at the committee have been talking about the biotech industry and how Pleasanton is kind of a hub for that. And there was a great opportunity for Dr. Nugent to attend to just see some of the discussions and application back in with the school district, because there's a lot of initiatives going on, and talking about how to support Las Positas and coursework in the biotech industry. And I know that there's a lot of talk at the city level in regards to more internships and job opportunities in the biotech field. So great discussions going on with the Economic Vitality Committee. So that's my report out from attending that meeting.
Anyone else? All right, I'll reiterate my request. Initially, it would just be a report back to the board on where staff is feeling. I know this has sort of been a project or been on several staff members' radar for a while about the thinking about our graduation requirements, and then we can have further discussion after that. So I'd look forward to that. All right, so this is, concludes our meeting this evening. The next board meeting will take place on Thursday, September 9th, 2021. And just to remind everyone, including my husband, the meetings now start at 6 o'clock. Good night, everyone.